Hello print folks, let's talk about making halftone separations for screen printing. Before we get started working on an actual image though, let's talk about some key concepts that are going to help us produce the best halftone separations possible. When you're working in Photoshop, there are different image modes that give you different ranges of color. We're going to use 4 in the process of creating our separations. Normally you create images in RGB color. That's red, green, and blue light additive color, where you have light waves mixing together to give you a sense of the full spectrum. When working in RGB, you tend to have really vivid color and the broadest ranges of color possible. When you put ink on paper, you're working with subtractive color. Process color, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, is when you lay different layers of pigments down on the surface of the paper. And when light waves hit those pigments, certain light waves are subtracted out while others bounce off and enter your eye and give you the perception of color. When you compare CMYK color to RGB color, you'll see that the range is much more compressed and the colors tend to look more dull. Grayscale is achromatic color, where you have black, white, and the full range of grays. And finally, bitmap, where it's either black pixels or white pixels, and it's the proximity of those pixels to each other that gives us the sense of a range of grays. Next, let's talk about image resolution. Pixels per inch, or PPI, is the image resolution in digital space. The higher the number of pixels, the higher your image quality. As you lower the number of pixels per inch, you start to see the individual pixels and lose resolution and detail. Lines per inch, or LPI, is your halftone resolution. We could be working in dots, lines, or even though diffusion dither is not an actual halftone, it functions similarly. With a higher LPI, we're going to see the line screen less and have a more clear image. As you go lower in your LPI, you see the halftone screen more, and your image becomes grittier. When determining the ideal LPI for your image, you have to think about the mesh count of the screen you're working with. The higher the mesh count, the finer the detail. The lower the mesh count, the more coarse your image is going to become. To calculate the LPI, we divide the screen mesh count by 3.5. So for a 110 mesh count screen, we would have a 34 line per inch halftone. For a 230 mesh count screen, we would have a 65 lines per inch halftone. Finally, we have dots per inch, or DPI. That's the printer image quality. Most inkjet printers print in either 1440 or 2880 dots per inch. When developing your image, it's important that you think about the dots per inch of the printer you're working with relative to the pixels per inch of the image you're creating in digital space. You want your PPI to divide into your DPI evenly. So if we were working with a 300 pixel per inch image and a printer with a resolution of 2880 dots per inch, we wouldn't have an even balance. We would have 9.6 dots of ink per pixel. However, if we were working with a 360 pixel per inch image and that same 2880 dots per inch printer, we would have 8 dots of ink per pixel. That's an even division of pixels, and that's what we're looking for. Let's create halftone separations for this image. It was developed at 360 pixels per inch in RGB color mode. I've saved the file under a new name, the original name, and then amended it with flattened so that I know exactly which version of the file I'm working with and that I can always go back to my original. First thing I'm going to do is flatten this image down, and then I'm going to change the mode to CMYK and click OK. I'll save it. And then if I look at my channels, I can see that I've got a composite CMYK channel and then a channel for cyan, which shows the image in grayscale, where I've got darker values indicating more cyan and lighter values indicating less. Same thing for magenta, yellow, and black. So I'll go back to my cyan channel. I'm going to copy everything and create a new document that's the size of my clipboard. I'll paste that cyan information in there and then begin transforming it into a halftone by going to Image, Mode, and Bitmap. The Bitmap panel tells me that I've got an image that's 360 pixels per inch, but that I'm going to be transforming it to 2880 pixels per inch, which matches the DPI of my inkjet printer that I'm going to be sending this to eventually. I've got it set to halftone screen, so I'll click OK, and then I can set the specifics for the cyan layer. I've got the frequency set to 65 LPI because I'm working with a screen mesh of 230, which means that my ideal frequency is 65 lines per inch. I've set the angle to 112.5, and I've got the shape set to round. When you click OK, it transforms your image into a halftone. I'll save this as weight, C for cyan, and as a Photoshop PDF, because that way it'll be ready for output. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy everything that I've got here. Actually, I'm going to change it back to grayscale first at a 1-to-1 ratio so that my final image will have 2880 dots per inch to match the resolution of my printer. Now I'll copy everything, and I'm going to create a new file in the CMYK color mode. In here I'm going to create a composite image so that I'll have a good sense of what my CMYK image will look like when I've finally printed it. I'll select the cyan layer, paste my information in there, and when you click on the CMYK layer, it gives you a sense of what that cyan layer will look like when printed. So now I'm going to follow this same path for the magenta, yellow, and black layers. I've now finished making my halftones for my magenta, yellow, and black. And I've copied them into my composite on the magenta channel, the yellow channel, and the black channel. So now that when I click on my CMYK channel, I can have a strong sense of what my image is going to look like on paper.